The parchment crackled like autumn leaves beneath Brother Matthias's trembling fingers as he traced the Latin text by candlelight. The monastery of San Benedetto had stood for 3 centuries on the windswept cliffs of northern Italy, its stone walls bearing witness to countless prayers and penances, but never had its ancient library harbored such blasphemous knowledge as what lay before him now. It was the winter of 1347, and the Black Death had already begun its merciless march across Europe, leaving behind a trail of corpses and despair. Yet what Matthias had discovered in the deepest recesses of the monastery's archives threatened something far worse than mere physical death. It promised the corruption of souls themselves. The manuscript bore no title, only a symbol that made his stomach churn, a serpent devouring its own tail, surrounded by 13 stars arranged in a pattern that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering candle light. The text was written in multiple hands, spanning what appeared to be several decades, each entry more disturbing than the last. Anno Domini 1298, the first entry began, *I, Cardinal Alessandro di Montefeltro, do hereby record the most unholy discovery made within the catacombs beneath the Church of Santa Maria del Grazie in Rome. What we have unearthed defies all understanding of God's natural order, yet I am compelled by duty to document these findings, lest future generations remain ignorant of the evil that once walked among us. Matthias paused, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of the scriptorium. The cardinal's name was familiar. He had been a powerful figure in the papal court until his sudden disappearance in 1301. Official records claimed he had died of fever, but here was evidence that he had lived at least 3 years longer than history recorded. The monk's eyes returned to the parchment, drawn by a morbid fascination he could not resist. The ritual chamber was discovered by pure accident when workers repairing the church's foundation broke through into a hidden vault. The stench that emerged was unlike anything in this world, not the sweet corruption of death, but something far more ancient and malevolent. When I descended with my fellow investigators, we found a circular chamber carved from black stone, its walls covered in symbols that hurt the eyes to look upon. Matthias felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold. He had heard whispers of such places, pre-Christian sites where the old gods had demanded terrible prices for their favor. The church had spent centuries consecrating such locations, building holy structures atop them to contain whatever darkness might linger below. At the center of the chamber stood an altar of the same black stone, stained with what could only be blood, though it appeared fresh despite the chamber having been sealed for centuries. Upon the altar lay the remains of 13 individuals, arranged in a pattern that defied comprehension. They were not skeletons, as one might expect, but perfectly preserved corpses that showed no signs of decay. The monk's hand moved instinctively to the wooden cross hanging from his neck. Preservation of the dead was considered a sign of divine favor. The incorruptible bodies of saints were treasured relics. But something in the cardinal's tone suggested these remains were anything but holy. Each corpse bore identical wounds, 7 cuts arranged in a specific pattern across the chest, and the eyes had been removed and replaced with polished obsidian stones. Most disturbing of all, their mouths had been sewn shut with golden thread, as if to prevent them from speaking even in death. When Brother Francesco attempted to examine one of the bodies more closely, it opened its eyes and looked directly at him. He has not spoken a coherent word since. Matthias set down the parchment with shaking hands. The rational part of his mind insisted this was merely the fevered imagination of a man driven mad by isolation and religious fervor. Yet the detail in the account, the precise descriptions and careful documentation, suggested otherwise. A sound from the corridor outside made him freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, approaching the scriptorium. It was well past Compline, and all the brothers should have been in their cells, preparing for sleep. Matthias quickly extinguished his candle and pressed himself against the wall, clutching the manuscript to his chest. The footsteps paused outside the door. In the darkness, Matthias could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps continued down the corridor, fading into the distance. When he was certain he was alone, Matthias relit his candle and returned to the manuscript. His curiosity had become a compulsion now, driving him to continue reading despite every instinct screaming at him to burn the accursed document. I have consulted with the most learned scholars in Rome, and none can identify the symbols carved into the chamber walls. They appear to be far older than any known script, predating even the earliest Greek texts. Brother Augustinus, who has studied the ancient mysteries, believes they may be connected to the cult of Mithras, though he admits the similarities are superficial at best. The cult of Mithras. Matthias had read references to the ancient mystery religion in various texts. Roman soldiers had worshipped the god in underground temples, performing secret rituals that the early Christians had condemned as demonic. But those temples had been destroyed centuries ago, their secrets buried with their adherents. Against my better judgment, I have decided to attempt a translation of the symbols. Brother Augustinus has provided me with several texts that may prove useful, including a fragment of the Corpus Hermeticum and a copy of the Picatrix that was confiscated from a Moorish scholar in Spain. God forgive me, but I must know what evil was practiced in that chamber. Matthias turned the page and found himself looking at a series of sketches that made his blood run cold. The symbols were indeed unlike anything he had ever seen: angular, twisted shapes that seemed to writhe and shift even when rendered in static ink. Below each symbol was a Latin translation in the cardinal's careful script. The first symbol represents binding, not the binding of books or prisoners, but the binding of souls to flesh beyond the natural span of life. The second speaks of transformation, the changing of one thing into another through means that violate God's natural order. The third, the cardinal's handwriting became increasingly erratic as the entry continued, as if his hand had been shaking as he wrote. The third symbol defies translation. Brother Augustinus collapsed when he attempted to speak its meaning aloud, and he has been in a state of delirium ever since. I fear we have delved too deeply into matters that mortal minds were never meant to comprehend. The next entry was dated several weeks later, and the handwriting was noticeably different. Still the cardinal's, but changed in subtle ways that suggested a fundamental alteration in the man himself. I have made a terrible discovery. The ritual described in the chamber was not performed once, but repeatedly over the course of centuries. Each iteration required 13 willing participants, individuals who understood the price they would pay for the knowledge they sought. They were not victims, but volunteers in an experiment that spans generations. Matthias felt his mouth go dry. Willing participants in their own damnation. The concept was almost too horrible to contemplate. What knowledge could be worth such a price? The purpose of the ritual was to create a bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, not for communication, as necromancers attempt, but for permanent passage. The 13 participants would sacrifice their mortal forms to become guardians of forbidden knowledge, preserving it for future generations who might prove worthy of its secrets. The monk's hands were shaking so violently now that he could barely hold the parchment steady. He wanted to stop reading, to burn the manuscript and pretend he had never found it, but something compelled him to continue. I have located the other chambers. There are 12 in total, scattered across Europe and the Holy Land, each containing 13 guardians and each holding a piece of a larger puzzle. The knowledge they protect is older than Christianity, older than Rome itself. It speaks of powers that existed before God created the world, entities that ruled in the darkness before the first light. 12 chambers. 12 sets of guardians. 156 souls bound to an existence that was neither life nor death, all to preserve knowledge that predated creation itself. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. I have been contacted by others who have made similar discoveries. We are forming a brotherhood dedicated to understanding and ultimately controlling these ancient powers. The church has grown weak and corrupt, more concerned with earthly wealth than spiritual truth. We will restore the proper order, using the wisdom of the ancients to guide humanity toward its true destiny. Matthias realized he was reading about the formation of a heretical sect within the church itself, cardinals and bishops and learned monks all united in their pursuit of forbidden knowledge. How many others had been corrupted by these discoveries? How far had the conspiracy spread? The next several entries detailed the cardinal's growing obsession with the ancient ritual. He had begun conducting his own experiments, attempting to communicate with the guardians in the Roman chamber. The results were described in increasingly frantic terms. They speak, but not with words. Their voices echo directly in the mind, carrying knowledge that burns like acid through the soul. They have shown me visions of the world as it was before the flood, when giants walked the earth and the boundaries between dimensions were thin. They promise to share their secrets, but the price grows steeper with each revelation. The handwriting had deteriorated further, becoming almost illegible in places. Matthias had to hold the parchment close to the candle flame to make out the words. The ritual requires a specific alignment of celestial bodies that occurs only once every 700 years. The last alignment was in 1298, when the chambers were first discovered. The next will be in 1998, 7 centuries hence. We have that long to prepare, to gather the necessary components and identify suitable candidates for the transformation. 700 years. Matthias calculated quickly if the cardinal was correct, the next alignment was still more than 6 centuries away. What could these conspirators accomplish in such a span of time? How many souls might they corrupt in their pursuit of ancient power? I have made my decision. When the time comes, I will be among the 13 who undergo the transformation. The knowledge I have gained must be preserved, and I am willing to pay any price to ensure its survival. The others think me mad, but they do not understand the true scope of what we have discovered. The final entry in the cardinal's hand was dated December 31st, 1300, the last day of the 13th century. Tomorrow begins the new age. I go now to join my brothers in the chamber beneath Santa Maria del Grazie. We have prepared everything according to the ancient instructions. The ritual will bind our souls to the guardianship of knowledge that will reshape the world. Future generations will thank us for our sacrifice, even if they never know our names. The next entry was in a different hand entirely, written in a script that Matthias recognized as belonging to the early 14th century. I, Brother Tommaso of Assisi, have discovered this record among the personal effects of Cardinal de Montefeltro, who disappeared on New Year's Day, 1301. I have investigated his claims and found them to be terrifyingly accurate. The chamber beneath Santa Maria del Grazie now contains 14 guardians instead of 13. The cardinal has joined their ranks, and his knowledge has been added to their collective wisdom. 14 guardians. The cardinal had succeeded in his mad quest, transforming himself into one of the undying sentinels of forbidden knowledge. Matthias felt sick at the implications. I have also discovered that the cardinal was not alone in his transformation. Reports have reached me of similar disappearances across Europe, learned men and women who vanished without explanation, leaving behind only cryptic notes about ancient wisdom and necessary sacrifices. The conspiracy is larger than any of us imagined. Brother Tommaso's entries continued for several pages, documenting his own investigation into the network of chambers and guardians. He had traveled extensively, visiting sites across Europe and the Mediterranean, confirming the existence of the ancient ritual chambers and their undead occupants. Each chamber I have visited tells the same story. 13 original guardians, preserved in their eternal vigil, joined by new converts who have undergone the transformation ritual. The knowledge they protect is being slowly assembled, piece by piece, as more individuals join their ranks. The monk had also discovered something else, a pattern to the disappearances that suggested the conspiracy was following a specific plan. They are not choosing candidates at random. Each new guardian possesses specific knowledge or skills that complement the existing collection. Scholars of ancient languages, masters of forgotten arts, individuals with access to rare texts and artifacts. They are building a library of human knowledge, preserved in undying flesh. Matthias realized the true horror of what he was reading. This was not merely a cult seeking power, it was a systematic effort to preserve and control all human knowledge, using methods that violated every principle of Christian doctrine. I have made contact with others who share my concerns. We have formed our own brotherhood, dedicated to opposing this ancient evil. We call ourselves the Order of the Sacred Flame, and we have sworn to prevent the completion of their grand design. But we are few, and they are many, and time is on their side. The Order of the Sacred Flame. Matthias had never heard of such an organization, but then, a secret society dedicated to fighting an even more secret conspiracy would hardly advertise its existence. We have learned that the ultimate goal of the Guardians is to perform a final ritual when all 12 chambers are fully staffed and the celestial alignment is perfect. This ritual will tear open the barriers between dimensions, allowing the ancient powers to return to our world. Humanity will be enslaved or destroyed, and the earth will be remade according to the will of entities that predate creation itself. The scope of the threat was almost incomprehensible. Not just the corruption of individual souls, but the potential destruction of all human civilization. Matthias felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had discovered. The final entries in Brother Tommaso's hand were increasingly desperate, documenting the Order's failed attempts to destroy the chambers or disrupt the Guardians' plans. We have tried everything: holy water, blessed weapons, prayers of exorcism. Nothing affects them. They exist in a state between life and death that makes them immune to conventional means of destruction. We have managed to prevent some individuals from joining their ranks, but for every one we save, 2 more disappear into their service. The last entry was dated 1347, the same year Matthias was reading it. The plague has begun, and I fear it may be connected to their activities. The Guardians have been more active recently, and there are reports of strange rituals being performed in the affected cities. I suspect they are using the chaos and death to further their goals, perhaps even accelerating the timeline for their final ritual. I am sending copies of this record to trusted allies across Europe. If I do not survive the coming darkness, perhaps others will continue our work. Matthias set down the manuscript with trembling hands. The Black Death as part of an ancient conspiracy, it seemed impossible, yet the timing was too convenient to be mere coincidence. If Brother Tommaso was correct, then the plague ravaging Europe was not a natural disaster but a deliberate act of evil. A sound from outside made him look up. The wind had picked up, howling around the monastery's stone walls with unusual intensity. But beneath the wind, he could hear something else, a low, rhythmic chanting that seemed to come from the very stones themselves. He extinguished his candle and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The monastery's courtyard was empty, but the chanting continued, growing louder and more distinct. The words were in no language he recognized, Yet somehow their meaning was clear in his mind, an invocation of powers that should never be named. As he watched, a figure emerged from the shadows near the chapel. It moved with the deliberate gait of someone walking in their sleep, but there was something wrong with its proportions. The arms were too long, the head tilted at an unnatural angle, and when it turned toward the scriptorium window, Matthias saw that its eyes reflected the moonlight like polished stones. The figure raised one elongated arm and pointed directly at him. In that moment, Matthias understood with terrible clarity that his discovery of the manuscript had not been an accident. He had been led to it, guided by forces that wanted him to know the truth, not to warn him away from danger, but to draw him deeper into their web. The chanting stopped abruptly, leaving only the sound of the wind and his own ragged breathing. The figure in the courtyard was gone, but Matthias knew it would return. They all would return, because he now possessed knowledge that made him valuable to their cause. He looked down at the manuscript in his hands, realizing that it was not just a record of past events but a recruitment tool, a carefully crafted lure designed to identify individuals who might be suitable for transformation. Brother Tommaso had not been fighting the conspiracy, he had been serving it, documenting its activities and identifying potential new guardians. And now Matthias was next in line to join their ranks, whether he wanted to or not. The monastery bell began to toll, though it was hours before lauds. 13 strikes echoed across the courtyard, and with each one, Matthias felt something fundamental change within himself. His vision grew sharper, his hearing more acute, and his understanding of the manuscript's true meaning became crystal clear. He was no longer just a reader of the ancient conspiracy, he had become part of it.